Dear students, today's lecture will be on sources of ancient Indian political thought. Now, primarily, these sources can be divided into two categories. One is the archaeological sources and the second is the literary sources. Today's lecture will be on the archaeological sources. Now, archaeological sources again can be classified into three types. One is the archaeological mounds and the artifacts. Second is the numismatic sources or the coins. And third is the epigraphic sources or the inscriptions. And also associated with the epigraphic sources are the paleographic sources. First, let us begin with the archaeological mounds and the artifacts. Archaeological mounds mean a kind of elevated portion on the land which in fact subsumes the older civilization and the ancient civilization. Now these mounds are normally excavated in two different ways and normally cut into two different ways. One is the vertical cut. Through vertical excavation, the different layers of the mounds come out, and these different layers indicate different time period. Those which are on the upper layers are relatively the new civilizations than those which are in the lower layers. And the horizontal excavation or the horizontal cut means that the excavation or the digging is done along horizontal lines and the entire civilization or culture of a particular period comes out. But normally, horizontal digging is very expensive and therefore the archaeological excavations are more in the line of vertical digging. Now what we know through archaeological sources is most important, and here we must make a distinction between prehistory and history. History begins with that period when people knew the art of writing, but there is also an era, a period before people knew the art of writing, and that period is normally referred to as prehistory. Now, archaeological sources are the only sources of knowing prehistoric people, their civilization, their culture, their thinking. So, archaeological sources are very important so far as the recreation of ancient Indian history is concerned. Apart from this, we must also remember that the Harappan civilization, which in fact was started around 3500 BC and continued till 2 centuries, during that civilization, people knew the art of writing. But till date, in spite of the best efforts of the people throughout the world, those scripts have not been deciphered. So, in that case also, although people knew the art of writing, still, in that case, the archaeological sources remain the most important sources for knowing the people living during the time of Harappan civilization. Now, coming to the details of the archaeological mounds and artifacts, we find that the Harappan people had used different kinds of seals having different kinds of symbols or pictures engraved on those seals. Now, the fact that these kinds of seals have been found to exist in Mesopotamia indicates that the people during the Harappan time had some kind of trading relations with the people of Mesopotamia. So we can understand that the people of the Harappan civilization had a kind of very developed trading and commercial activities. Coming to the other kinds of artifacts that we have found from the sites of Harappan civilization, we know that there have been several pictures or several artifacts depicting female deities or female individuals. This indicates that women during that era had a high position in the society. So these artifacts teach us, through these artifacts we have been able to recreate that period, and we get to know the people living in that era, their kind of civilization, their kind of settlement, etc. Like, let me put another illustration. We have noticed that in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, there were basically two kinds of dwelling places. One is the large houses, almost like a palatial habitation, and the other is somewhat smaller kind of house. We get to know that people who were rich, who were politically powerful, lived in those large houses, while the ordinary people, they used to live in the relatively smaller houses. So from here also we can understand that there was a kind of stratification even during the time of Harappan civilization. So these artifacts tell us something about the people who either did not know the art of writing or who had a kind of writing which is yet to be deciphered, whose script does not till date tell us their settlement, their civilization. So this is the archaeological mounds and the artifacts which constitute one important aspects of the archaeological sources. The second is the numismatic sources. Here, numismatic sources indicate the study of coins. What we get to know from different kinds of coins, their availability, their circulation, their depiction of picture, from all these things we get to know how the people of a particular period lived, their kind of economic activities, their social activities, and even to an extent their aesthetic activities. So coming to the coins, we find that during ancient India, coins were available, although they were not found at the sites of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilization. So from this at least we may conclude that the Harappan people did not use coins as their system of currency or as their unit of economic activities. But after the Harappan civilization, from the Maurya period to the Gupta period and to the post-Gupta period, we have been able to excavate innumerable number of coins in different shapes, different sizes, and made up of different kinds of metals. From this also, we can also conclude that people at that time did not use paper currency. This is one thing that we get to know. And the other thing is also that people were not engaged in barter system. So the circulation of coins at least indicates these two things. Now, coming to the coins specifically, we have noticed that the earliest coins or the earliest coins that are made available to us that were found during the 600 BC or around that time were basically made up of silver. Then we have coins made up of gold, copper, bronze, and later on, in fact, in a much later period, after say about 600 AD, we have certain coins made up of earthenwares. But from the earliest coins, we come to know that people knew the use of metal. They knew how to mold metal, how to cast them and to make into coins. So this kind of knowledge was available to them. We also get to know these things from the coins that are available to us. Besides, we also find certain pictures that tell us many things. For instance, there is a coin that was in existence during the time of Samudragupta where we find that the emperor was fond of music. Again, we find a later king, Satabahana king, Gautamiputra Satakarni. He was found on a coin traveling as if somewhere on a boat. The picture of the boat indicates that there was trading relations where the king was doing certain trading activities with people where he had to take a voyage on a boat. So, these pictures on the coins tell us many things about a particular dynasty, about a particular period of time, about the rulers, and also about the way that ruler or the dynasty was carrying on themselves. Apart from this, we find that on certain occasions there were names engraved on coins, that is, the coins were circulated by that person. Yes, and this is a very important distinction that we should make from ancient coins with that of the modern currency. Nowadays, we find that currency is something that is being circulated only by the government or the state. No private individual can make a currency and can circulate it. But in ancient India, private merchants, traders, or even guilds could make coins, could use them as their currency, and could carry on economic activities with those coins. Obviously, they had to take permission from the ruler, but these practice could be done even by private individuals during that time. So, coins constitute a very important archaeological source which helps us to recreate ancient India, to know the past and to know their economic, social and other activities. The third area is the epigraphic source. Many scholars argue, like R.S. Sharma, he points out that epigraphic sources are more important than the numismatic sources so far as ancient Indian political thought is concerned, because epigraphy tells us things which cannot a coin tell us. So, epigraphic sources constitute a major area of archaeological source. Now, what does epigraphic source mean? Epigraphic source means inscriptions. It was the practice of the ancient rulers to make certain statues or statuettes engraved on stone, sometimes on copper or bronze, and to write something on its sides or on its bottom. Now the writing and the study of those writings constitute the paleographic source. So the epigraphic source along with the paleographic source tells us lot more things about the past which even the literary sources cannot do. So the epigraphic sources constitute a major element. We find that in ancient India there have been two kinds of epigraphic sources or inscriptions. One is the official inscriptions and the other is the private or the non-official inscriptions. In some cases, there have been some eulogistic inscriptions where the king himself depicts his achievements on the inscriptions and that are found to exist at certain places. For instance, we find in many places of modern Bihar, in Kosambi, in Rajagriha, in Vaishali, we have found many inscriptions there, and from those inscriptions we get to know the past, the rulers' activities, the rulers' achievements, etc. One of the major inscriptions happens to be that of Emperor Asoka, who in fact inscribed many things on the stones, on the bronze or on copper, and say many things through the writings engraved on the sides or on the bottom. For instance, we come to know that during the reign of Emperor Asoka, he in fact urged people to respect seniors, to respect parents, to maintain a harmonious relations amongst themselves, to respect Sromanas, to respect Brahmanas, and to undertake trading activities. We get to know these things from many inscriptions that were put forward by Emperor Asoka. We come to know that along with the Brahmanas, the Sromanas were put on the same plane. It indicates that we know these things from other sources too, but this emphasis and putting the Sromanas on with the Brahmanas on the same footing indicates that Buddhism, along with the traditional Hinduism and the caste order, was very much popular during his time. We also come to know the kind of relations that Emperor Asoka had with other people, with other countries, and with the people belonging to the different strata. Another inscription we may cite here, that is the inscription of Samudragupta. Obviously, it belongs to the Gupta period. It is kind of a eulogistic inscription where the court poet of Samudragupta, Harisena, wrote certain eulogies about his master and about Emperor Samudragupta. Maybe these are written in a very positive tone or in a positive overtone, but still we get to know that how Samudragupta was hailed by the people as an emperor, as someone whose empire was large enough to encompass almost the whole of modern India. So this inscription tells us the kind of activities that the Gupta rulers or the Gupta period undertook. Another emperor, she in fact happens to be a woman emperor, not an emperor so to say, but a ruler. She is Nayanika. She belongs to the Satavahana dynasty, and from a Nasik inscription we get to know that Nayanika performed certain sacrifices and performed certain rituals. We know that there was total Vedic prohibition on these practices. These practices could not be done by women during that time. But Nayanika, being a woman, could rule a certain part of the territory and could do also those performances. It indicates that the Satavahana dynasty perhaps was a bit different from the rest. There was a kind of social order which was not in congruence or in consistence with what we normally have with respect to ancient political India, but it is a kind of situation which is different from the rest. So, these epigraphic sources, along with the paleography, tell us many things that are normally not available through the literary sources. So today we have discussed the sources of ancient Indian political thought. Now, out of these sources, two are most important. One is the archaeological sources and the other is the literary sources. Today we have focused only upon the archaeological sources. Now, archaeological sources consist of principally three kinds. One is the archaeological mounds and the artifacts. Second is the numismatic sources, and third is the epigraphic sources along with the paleographic sources. By archaeological mounds and artifacts, we mean the different kinds of things that were used by the ancient people. By numismatic sources, we mean the different kinds of coins that were used by the ancient people and were in circulation during that time. And by epigraphic sources, we principally mean the inscriptions along with the writings that are engraved on the inscriptions, and those writings and their study is referred to as the paleographic sources.